When we think about stroke recovery, our minds usually go straight to physical therapy, medications, maybe some rest. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful tools for healing the brain isn't found in the gym or the pharmacy, but actually in the kitchen? Today, we're going to dig into how nutrition has gone from just simple support to a really cutting-edge strategy for recovery.
All right, so let's just jump right in with a question. After a person has a stroke and starts on that long road to recovery, what's one of the most critical elements that we often underestimate? I mean, something that has this huge power to either speed up healing or become a massive roadblock. And the answer, which might surprise you, is right there on the dinner plate. Yeah, we're talking about food. But, and this is the important part, we're not talking about just any food. We're talking about a super targeted nutritional strategy, one that's designed specifically to help rebuild the brain.
So before we can really appreciate the solution, we have to get a handle on the problem. And for a lot of stroke survivors, getting the right nutrition is this unseen but really significant hurdle. And its impact on their recovery, it's huge. A massive part of the problem starts with a really fundamental challenge. Research shows that at least half, 50% of stroke patients have some kind of trouble swallowing. Now, this isn't just a small inconvenience. It's a direct barrier to getting the fuel that their body and brain desperately need to heal. Yeah, the medical term for this is dysphagia. And it's not just about food being tricky to eat. It can lead to some really serious complications, like aspiration pneumonia. That's when food or liquid actually gets into the lungs. That, plus the simple difficulty of getting enough calories and fluids, means dehydration and malnutrition can set in really fast. And the consequences are no joke. The clinical guidelines are super clear on this. A patient's nutritional status is a solid, independent predictor of how well they're going to recover. Malnutrition is linked to poor outcomes, a higher risk of other health issues, longer and more expensive hospital stays, and it can actually make all that hard work in rehab less effective. I mean, think about it. You can't rebuild a house if you don't have a steady supply of building materials, right?
But here's where the story gets really hopeful. The way the clinical community thinks about this has really shifted. We're moving beyond just trying to manage the problem of malnutrition and into this new proactive science of actually fueling the brain's repair.
This slide really nails that huge shift in thinking. The old way was basically about simple caloric support, just giving enough energy to prevent weight loss. But the new science is so much more ambitious. It's about using nutrition as this dynamic, active tool to help the brain heal and literally rewire itself. And this new field has a name: neuronutrition. The main idea here is that the brain's amazing ability to reorganize and restore lost functions, what we call neuroplasticity, is totally dependent on the building blocks we give it through our diet. It's about providing the brain with the precise materials it needs to get the job done.
So what is neuronutrition actually doing? Well, it targets some key problems. See, after a stroke, the body is under a ton of stress. So this strategy is designed to fight things like widespread inflammation, cell damage from what's called oxidative stress, that frustrating muscle loss known as anabolic resistance, and it helps fix disruptions to that super important gut-brain connection.
Okay, so that's the science. But how does this all work in practice? Let's open up the playbook and see how all this science gets turned into a real, actionable plan for stroke survivors and their families. Modern clinical guidelines are really built on 4 main pillars. First, you've got to screen for risks early, like within hours of someone being admitted to the hospital. Second, you take a protein-first approach to fight off that muscle wasting. Third, you adopt these proven brain-healthy diets for long-term health. And finally, and this is so important, you empower caregivers with the knowledge they need to keep this support going at home. Let's just zoom in on that protein-first approach for a second. Muscle loss, or sarcopenia, is a huge problem after a stroke. It leads to weakness, fatigue. It just makes everything harder. To fight back, guidelines often recommend a pretty significant amount of protein, around 1.2 to 1.5 grams for every kilogram of body weight each day. This gives the body the essential amino acids it needs to hold on to strength and really support all that hard work in physical therapy. And for the long game, for long-term brain health, dietary patterns like the Mediterranean or the Mind diet are absolutely key. The focus is pretty simple. Load up on whole, anti-inflammatory foods. We're talking leafy greens, tons of vegetables, fish that's rich in omega-3s, nuts, and olive oil. And at the same time, you're trying to limit the foods that can actually promote inflammation, like red meats, fried foods, and a lot of sweets.
Now, it's really important to get that this isn't just a short-term fix in the hospital. A truly successful nutritional strategy grows and changes with the survivor, supporting them through every single stage of their recovery journey, from the ICU all the way back to their own kitchen.
You can almost think about it in 3 phases. In the acute phase, right after the stroke, the goal is survival, just preventing malnutrition and helping the body's initial healing process. Then you move into the rehab phase, and the focus shifts to more advanced goals, really providing the fuel for that neuroplasticity and for intense physical therapy. And finally, in the chronic long-term phase, it's all about maintaining brain health and doing everything you can to prevent another stroke. This is just such a powerful idea. For survivors and their caregivers, it completely reframes the daily routine. Recovery stops being something that just happens in a clinic for an hour a day. By embracing this purposeful way of eating, every single meal, every drink, every snack, it all becomes a meaningful, active step in the journey of rebuilding the brain. You know, this quote from a recent clinical analysis just sums it all up perfectly. When we view nutrition not as this passive thing in the background, but as a dynamic, pleiotropic intervention, which is a fancy way of saying it has multiple positive effects all over the body, that's how we can best support the brain in recovery. It's a fundamental change in how we look at recovery. So, we'll end on this thought. If every single meal is an opportunity to provide the building blocks for healing, to cool down inflammation, and to fuel the brain's amazing ability to rewire itself, well, that changes the entire perspective, doesn't it? It makes recovery a much more hopeful, active, and empowered process. It really makes you wonder, what does the future of recovery look like?